So now we're going to block the felt onto this piece quickly. Just in case you haven't seen it before, what I normally do is use a kettle with the felt. With Cinema, I use my iron and wet cloth, and with felt I can just put it over for a little bit, let it boil up through, and then it will go onto this piece and stretch over. Be careful with this because you can easily burn your hands. The steam can easily shoot out the side. It's getting very hot now, so I'm just going to move in my hands. So I could leave that on there and then I'll just turn it off in a sec. But by opening up the lid, that actually stops it from switching itself off, so you can keep it boiling. Just be ever so careful with it. Now it's nice and hot. We pull at the front and the back first, and then we'll pull the sides there. I'm just putting the sides, front and back. So next stage, I have blocked this one. So you've all done this before, you've blocked felt. This is a velour felt, it's a really nice one. You've all blocked with felt before, you know how to do that, you know how to block. So you don't need to go over that too much. This one's just a little one, little teardrop. Just pulled it all underneath, pinned it all. The only problem that we have is here, because it's such a sharp point, but we can cut this off later. I've just folded it over and pulled it as much as possible. You could put a little slice in there and fold them over later on and sew it down and push it in if you want to, or you can cut right to the seam here. So I just want to tell you that I blocked with this one and then I stiffened it. So I stiffened it twice. I stiffened it with this one, which is a felt stiffener. This is a smelly old-fashioned one, it's not the water-based one. So this one I find personally is a bit easier to use on the felt than the water-based one. The water-based I find is better for Cinema, but you might be different to me. You might like the other one, so that's absolutely fine. It just work with the one that you like the best. But this particular one, for this one I've used felt stiffener, and I used a nice big brush. Never get this wet. This is only ever for this stiffener, not for any of the other ones. So I just keep this brush for this stiffener. I'll put a little bit in a pot and then put the brush in and then just circle that inside. So I can show you that again in a minute. In my other videos you would have seen how I do that and how I actually stiffen it, especially in the last one, which we did trilby hats, and I did use the stiffener in that one. So now we're just going to take these pins out because I'm going to need to block the leather on in a minute. But I could just show you how easy it is to take it off and then put it back on again. So what I did was stiffened it, took the pins out, took all the felt off, stiffened it, and then put it back on the block. You can do that once or twice. I did it twice just to make it extra hard. Because if you're blocking the leather on, you don't want the leather to shrink back and pull this in. You need this to be reasonably strong and not really soft. So let's just take this off, open it up. It would have stuck to the bag or cling film a little bit, so you just have to ease it off. If you haven't put any stiffener in it yet, then it's easier to get it out, but if you have put stiffener in it, then it can be a little bit more tricky, and you don't want to upset the shape when you're pulling it out. There we go, that's the shape. It's still a little bit soft, so we could use some more, but also I only stiffened it this morning, so that can stiffen for another, overnight, just to make sure that's nice and hard. So what I did was block, then took it off, then got this, put some in a cup, put my brush in. You never need to wash this, because once you put it into the stiffener again, it goes nice and it's still wet, so it sort of comes apart again, and you can move it. becomes more pliable. But when it's dry, it's absolutely solid, it's rock hard. When you put it back into the stiffener, then it becomes more loose, and then you can put that in. So you get a little bit of stiffener and you just put it in and you rub it in circles. You can see that I'm just going to go up to the edge and then I'm rubbing it in circles, and I'll do that all the way around the outside and then in the middle as well to make sure that's all firm. Then I put that back on the block, pin it, leave that overnight and do it again the next day. Some people might actually sort of block with that, then put that on and then leave that to dry and then take them apart and stiffen it. But you know, you can do it however you like, but I just like to make sure this is nice and firm before I work with my leather. So I want to put 2 lots of stiffener in there, make sure that's nice and solid. Also, we can cut off some of this. We don't need all of this excess. I'll cut it so I've got about 1 inch overlap. So you could do 1.5 centimetres to 1 inch, which is roughly the same. So nice scissors, which are fabric scissors, felt to that side. Don't need the stiffener anymore. Already done. Always have cling film or a bag on your block. Said this before, always do that just so that this is not going to stick to it. If any of the glue or any of the steam, water gets into the block, it ruins the block, and also sometimes you can't get it off. So that's why we always put this plastic on so that you can get this off your block quite easily. Place that back on. Now we're going to work with the leather. So this is the leather that I had before that I said I was going to work with. It's a cowhide. It's thin, but it's thickish, but it's reasonably thin to use. So this is fine. Just look out for little blemishes. I mean, you can see here I'm moving it around. It's a little bit thicker on the end there, it feels, than it does over here. So I probably use this section over here. Just pick the best bit for you. Some of it pulls in different directions. So also you can just test it so I can get some strength from there, from there. That all seems good. Oh, great strength on the bias there. Actually, same. Going straight across. So that all seems okay to use. Some sections you might find more stretchy than others, and if you've got a pointy end, then you might want the more stretchy section on the pointy end. So that's why I say just pull it around and see which bit is best for you. But now I ordered in this, and this is a velour leather, and this is from McCulloch & Wallace, and this is so beautiful. It's just much thinner than this one. And it's got a little sort of veloury shine to one side and then your more waxy side on the other. This will show up blemishes and little scratches more than this one. If I do that with it, you know, the layer comes off a bit, but you don't see any white marks. With this one here, if I just do that with my nail, I'm seeing a little white mark. This is the velour, I presume. So you push it one way and you get a different sort of the weave moving slightly. So you have to be careful that you're not going to get too many blemishes on there. This will be a little bit harder to work with, but also you're going to get that sort of rough look that you might like as well. So you can choose the best section. You could have it this way round, or you could have it this way round. It's going to be easier to work with this way round because I presume this way you might end up seeing some, when we make it wet, you might end up seeing some difference in grade and colour. If you can see here, but this one looks a little bit more soft and veloury than this one here. So, but I think this is beautiful. So it's a nice, lovely piece. I'm just going to cut an area that I need. Just test it. Yeah, I can get stretch. Not so much stretch that way, more that way. How much do I need? Pick an area that you also like the look of. But crease that side. I quite like these sort of, it's so natural. You've got grading and colour here, and you've got a little imperfection here, but I quite like that, to use that on. It really does look like leather, so you can use bits like that. I love textures and colours, and the way it's just changing a little bit, I think that's quite nice. So if we had that on, we could pull that section, or here, you see there it's much more matte, and if I use this side, some people wouldn't use this because they would say that's a bit thinner and it's you know, difference in colour and texture, but you could use that side, it could be quite nice. Okay, let's make sure we've got enough. Pull it underneath, okay, cut this off. This piece that I bought is about £20. So it cost me about 30 with delivery and VAT. Now the next thing I've got is a little pot of water, so I'm going to soak this. So I'm just going to put this in the water, and I would leave that in there for about 5 minutes, between sort of 5 and 20 minutes. It's okay. So let's just leave that in there for 5 minutes and we come back and block it on. So I've just let that soak there for just over 5 minutes, probably, yeah, nearly 10. I've put a cloth down on here, so this is not going to make my tablecloth so wet, just to protect it a little bit because it's going to be dripping. So now we can just take this out. It's so soft now. So that's our little bundle, and I'm just going to squeeze some of the water out, so it's not going to be dripping. Just lay it down on here a second whilst I smooth it out. And also make sure it's not dripping wet. Looks so lovely and dark now compared to what it was. Okay, now let's stretch this over. So I've got enough space, I've got at least 1 inch to fold underneath all the way around, make sure that's enough. And then pull your 2 sides first. So I'm going to pull those sections, push that underneath, and then I'm going to pull the front and back. Just going to move it over slightly. I've got some little crackles coming on this side, so I think I want that on the edge. Make sure I've got enough underneath. Okay, so let's pull the two sides. And we can just pin underneath. Now with these, if they dent the leather, then you're not going to get that hole out like you would with cinema is fine. With felt, you can just brush it over with your nail. You have to be careful with the leather. You're not going to get rid of the hole. So don't put it anywhere where it's going to be seen. It can go in underneath where you're not going to see it. This doesn't have like cinema has a bias on it, so you've got your weave and your weave going straight across and down, and then you've got your bias in the middle. Leather is not like that. It doesn't really have a bias. It's a bit like felt. So, but some pieces, like I said earlier, pull easier than others. So once you've found those sections, a bit that pulls a little bit easier, you can use that on your point if you've got a point. Otherwise, you're just going to be pulling it as normal, doing the front and the back like you would with felt. It's two sides, front and back. See how that's just coming across there quite nicely. So let's just fold the front down a little bit. I've got a bulk of felt there. I'm just going to trim that slightly, because we're going to cut this off later anyway, and then I can just push one flap under the other one to push that down a bit. Okay, done front, I'll do a bit on the back. Now we've got little crinkles here. So I've got my front and my back and my two sides done, and then I've got my corners to think about. So then I'm just going to sort of wriggle these, pull and wriggle to see what I can get out. Looking good. Just wriggle and pull. I don't want to really see any pleats just underneath if possible. Try and get rid of them. I can just feel a bump from the felt, so just push that out. Now I don't want to be pushing all of this over to that section and then having too much here to get rid of. So I just remember that I'm not pushing it that way. I am just pulling it straight down. Okay, then we can just have a look and see if we've got any wrinkles, pull marks that we don't want, any blemishes or any scratches that might have happened. That all looks okay. And then underneath we've got all of the pins. Just make sure those are in securely and see if you can pull any more. Okay, they all feel like they're firmly in. That all looks okay. It's very dark right now, but when that when it dries, it will lighten up again to be the grey that we saw earlier. So I'm just going to leave that overnight to dry nicely, and also the stiffener inside will finish off and really dry as well. You can heat that up if you wanted to dry it under a hairdryer, but then it might start cracking because it's drying too quickly. So I would just leave that to naturally dry in a warm room overnight, and then see what happens tomorrow. Maybe you need to leave it for a little bit longer. But a warm room near a heater, but not too close so that it dries out too quickly. You want it to dry quite naturally. There we go. I just put that to the side a second because the next one I want to show you is how to do it on a button base. So that is really difficult, much more difficult than that one because that is more flat. So this one you've actually got to get the felt to go right underneath, and I know a lot of you have got the button one and you want to do it on the button one, so if I didn't show you, then you'd start to work on it and you'd find you're going to have a lot of trouble with it. So I just want to show you how I would do that. First of all, you have to block felt on it again, so I've already done that. I've blocked the felt on. I've stiffened it inside and then re-put that back on, so I'm going to leave that to dry. So when I come back to you in a minute, you can then see how I put the felt on, the leather. You'll see how I put the leather on this one.